And he may say some things that you think is misinformation, and he may platform people that you think are wrong.
Jon Stewart has come out to defend Joe Rogan and has pinpointed what he thinks is the main driver towards disinformation. So I have a couple of clips to show you here. Now, there's a lot more nuance to this conversation than just these clips, but it does give you an idea of Jon Stewart's position, and I have a lot to say about this. So here is the first clip.
This is going to be a blanket statement.
Okay.
And I would say this: don't leave, don't abandon, don't censor, engage. I'm not saying it's always going to work out fruitfully, but I'm always of the mindset that engagement, and especially with someone like a Joe Rogan, who is not, in my mind, an ideologue in any way. And I think the proof of that was, I don't know if you remember, there was a guy who went on his podcast named Josh Zeps, they were talking about, I think Joe said, myocarditis. Kids shouldn't get the vaccine because it causes a higher risk of myocarditis. And Josh said, well, actually getting COVID is a higher risk of myocarditis for kids, so they should get vaccinated. He said, no, it's not. He said, no, I think it is. He goes, no, I'm pretty sure it's the other way. And they looked it up. And when they looked it up, it came out that it's a much greater risk if you get COVID and you're, 8 to 12 or 6 to 15 or whatever the age range was. It's a much greater risk of myocarditis catching COVID than it is getting the vaccine. And if you are an ideologue or if you are a dishonest person, that is the moment. Like Tucker Carlson in that situation never would have looked it up and would have given that look he gives like somebody's giving him a confusion enema. Like they're just like they're just firing confusion up his ass. And Joe just went like, I didn't know. Okay, I didn't get that. And that to me says, that's a person that you can engage with. You're a musician. Like, how much misinformation is spread by, like, Eric Clapton is on platforms that you're on, and he's a fucking psycho. So do you remove yourself from every platform? By the way, do we only do these conversations so that I will get in trouble?
All right. As somebody who was largely influenced by Jon Stewart before I started doing any of this, and also watched Joe Rogan for a number of years, I have a lot of thoughts about this. But first, I just want to say, on that last point about the musicians, they're not hosting podcasts where they are lying to people about the realities around the pandemic and vaccines. Now, that isn't to say, I've been clear before, I don't think Rogan should be pulled off of Spotify. I'll get to why that, even if you thought that's a good idea, it wouldn't solve anything. It'd make the situation actually worse. But, so, I'm not for censoring him, but it is important to point out the difference there between, musicians and what they're putting on the platform and what someone like Rogan is putting on the platform. And also the fact that Rogan is literally paid by Spotify. He's an employee of Spotify, $100 million contract. So Spotify has, a little more responsibility in that case, as opposed to somebody who's just putting their music up on Spotify, or someone's putting their podcast up on Spotify who's not getting paid. Now, before I get to this second clip and react a little more, I do want to point out, I get some pushback for covering stuff like this, which to me is hilarious. Like, there is a reason why I cover a story like this, why I cover Joe Rogan. Let me point to exactly why. He's very popular. So now this is, to be fair, is an estimate on ratings. So Spotify does not release their official numbers, but I'm sure this is not far off. If anything, this is lowballing it. So Nielsen ratings here for, Fox News shows like Tucker, Hannity, and Rachel Maddow at MSNBC and CNN, they are nothing compared to the kinds of viewership and listeners that Joe Rogan gets. So his impact on society is real. He may not seem like, mainstream media, and I guess he's not technically, cable news or mainstream media, but he has a larger audience than mainstream media. So in that sense, he is mainstream, and that's why it's important to call out when there is misinformation being spread. Now, that isn't to say everything Joe Rogan puts out there is a lie or misinformation. He's had on guests like Josh Zeps, who Jon Stewart points out there, where, there's facts getting out there. But those conversations at this point are few and far between, which is why I generally have stopped listening to Rogan's podcast, because he's had a lot he's had a lot more lunatics on his show compared to people like a Josh Sepps or Cornel West, who was on like 3 years ago, Bernie Sanders on 3 years ago. You know, the occasional guest that is interesting and educated in politics. Those people at this point are incredibly rare, which also gets to the engagement part of his point here, which I think is accurate. Yes, people should engage with Rogan. They should try to get on the show, but engagement is a two-way street. Rogan has to be willing to want to have those people on his show and have those other conversations. So that's, engagement is fine. I agree with it, yes, but unless he's willing to have those people on, then engagement means nothing. Now, Rogan put out recently in that video he put on Instagram that he is now willing, or he's going to re-examine, I guess, how he covers these issues and maybe have somebody on, after having someone on who's completely insane, have somebody on who actually knows what they're talking about. If Rogan does that, that'll be great. I'm a little skeptical until that happens, but seeing where Rogan came from, what he used to be, at least for a few years, when he was willing to have those differing conversations, I am more willing to believe that he does want to do that. But again, I'm skeptical until it happens. But I do think Jon Stewart's right to point out that, pulling Rogan off Spotify isn't going to solve anything. Even if you think that's a good idea, just play it out in your head. Okay, so Rogan has an exclusivity deal with Spotify. If Spotify buys him out, ends that deal, Rogan can still go on Spotify because Spotify is an open platform. My podcast is on Spotify, so anyone can put their podcast up on there. And he would still also be able to be on YouTube, be able to be on, Apple Podcasts. So he'd be able to be on every other platform. It wouldn't shrink his audience. If anything, it may grow him. And there is some reporting that indicates that Rogan may have actually hurt himself in terms of his audience by going Spotify exclusive. So, obviously this is going to change. Maybe it's changed since a lot of the vaccine BS has popped up and he's been in the news a lot more. But you see here, this is Joe Rogan follower. Now, this is obviously there's limited ways to be able to measure this kind of thing, but this is one way to measure Rogan's impact. Joe Rogan follower bump waned after he went exclusive to Spotify. So this is average Twitter followers gained for Rogan guests with under 500,000 total followers. Basically pointing out here, if somebody was not really all that well known, or at least not mainstream before going on Rogan's show, what is the impact that person has on their follow count once they're on Rogan's show? So before he went exclusive, those guests received a lot more support or a lot more attention after they were on a show compared to once Rogan went exclusive, meaning that it's likely less people watched his show after he went exclusive to Spotify. Now, again, that may have changed in recent months with all this news and all this stuff going on, but that's what the data, at least this data point, shows. And because Spotify doesn't release official numbers, it's hard to really know what Rogan's impact is and how it has differed since he's gone exclusive. I also want to point out here, in terms of the deplatforming aspect of this petition's stupid. I like Move On. I support a lot of what they fight for. Trying to pull him off Spotify with this petition is just dumb. Again, think this through. What is this going to accomplish? Even if they, banned him on the platform, is that really going to shrink his audience, or is that just going to turn him into a martyr and he's going to become even more popular? He's not going to be banned on every tech platform. He's not an Alex Jones. He's not overtly as damaging to these tech platforms the way that Alex Jones was. So he's still going to be on these platforms. He's still going to be out there. Trying to pull him off Spotify is not going to solve anything. Now, I understand, yes, he's had a serious impact. I would say a negative impact on society when it comes to the pandemic and a lot of the misinformation or disinformation he's pushed out there with his guests. But still, that doesn't mean pulling him down is going to solve the problem. Even if that was a option, which I don't think Spotify is even considering because of the contract they have with him. Now, let me go to this next clip, which goes to what Jon Stewart sees as the real issue.
He has 4-hour conversations, and they are expansive, and he may say some things that you think is misinformation, and he may platform people that you think are wrong, but to single that out as something so egregious as to have to be. I just don't. I think there are dishonest, bad actors in the world, and identifying those is so much more important to me. And I also think sometimes those grand gestures of I'm removing myself doesn't necessarily take into account, like you're on Comcast, right? Comcast or Time Warner. So if you're on any cable station, right, they've got Fox News on. You telling me Fox News isn't a willful purveyor of misinformation, dishonest to its core? So now everybody on TV has to pull out of their fucking shows or deplatform because in the same tube that you exist, they exist. And by the way, I'm more worried about the algorithm of misinformation than the purveyor of misinformation. Misinformation will always be out there, but if the algorithm drives people further and further down the rabbit hole, the fucking algorithm is the amplifier and the catalyst of extremism. And if you can, I would much rather fuck with the algorithm than deplatform and all these other things.
All right, so I'll get to the algorithm part of this conversation in a second here, but first the comparison of Comcast, Fox News versus, Spotify, Joe Rogan, I think largely makes sense here. Now, I do think it's a lot different. I mean, Jon Stewart there is kind of implying that people are telling, people like Neil Young to pull their music off Spotify. That's not what's happening. They're making that decision themselves. If, I don't know, another network said, hey, I'm going to pull this network off of Comcast because you have Fox News on there, I'd be in support of that. Like, you want to do that? Go right ahead. I don't think it's going to really have a dent. I think maybe that's his larger point here. It's not really going to have an impact unless every single, network pulls out. But it is fair to ask, hey, it's not happening in this situation with Comcast. Why do you expect it to happen in the situation with Spotify? But that said, nothing against the artists that are doing this as to, to make a point or whatever their point is. But nothing against them. I think it's fine for them to do that. But you're not seeing the same thing happen on Comcast. Now, on the bad actors part. So he says it's more important to go after bad actors that he thinks are dangerous. He doesn't think someone like Joe Rogan is an ideologue, which I agree with his point on that. But there is something, it is worth mentioning here, that the reason why Rogan is so effective is because he isn't an ideologue, is because he has just these conversations, but the conversations largely driven by whoever's in front of him. So having information come in through that sort of format, be it through comedy or just a general conversation for a few hours, is, I think, more effective than a show like Tucker, where you go in with, kind of knowing what to expect there. Whereas with a conversation, you may be convinced on a horrible idea because you heard this person for 3 hours and they sounded okay to you. And by the way, I've had, this is when I stopped watching or stopped listening to Rogan's show. He had on, it was some white nationalist. I forget his name now, but basically I didn't realize what this conversation was till about an hour into it. And I only really realized who the person he was talking to was once they got to, certain topics. But I don't think it would have been as obvious to other people who aren't in the political discourse, which is, again, shows you why a platform like that is so effective. Because you're going to have listeners listening, not even realizing what they are consuming until all of a sudden they have these completely insane reactionary ideas that they got because of a certain guest on Rogan's show. And that definitely has happened. Now, when it comes to the algorithm, I agree with this completely. The algorithm is the main driver behind a lot of this misinformation, this disinformation. It drives people down a reactionary hole, and it does this on YouTube. It does it on Facebook, I think, to an even worse degree. But you can see it. I mean, I see this in my comments. I see it, everyone has this experience where when it comes to a completely blank slate. So you started a new account, you're watching videos on YouTube, not even political videos. You're just watching, I don't know. I have this experience with an account that I use for my child when watching, kids videos. If you go to the news section, it's like, hey, watch this Jordan Peterson video. Hey, watch this Ben Shapiro video. Why? I didn't I've watched no political content on this channel. Why are you sending me this reactionary bullshit immediately? So YouTube, whatever is in their algorithm, and again, it's not just, you know, some random code generated. People are behind these algorithms that have programmed this, but whatever is behind it has definitely driven people to the right, and not even just, you know, down a hole, but starts them off on the right. Yet when you try to watch an independent, you know, lefty, like, I don't know, Humanist Report, for example, you can watch one of his videos. The next video suggests it's going to be, you know, Seth Meyers, John Oliver, Stephen Colbert. They never put you to another independent-minded YouTube channel. So they won't put you towards, you know, Nomiki Konst or Kyle Kalinske. They'll instead send you down I guess, for about lack of a better term here, a liberal hole, where they're going to send you with something that's kind of similar in a way, not really, but kind of similar to what you're watching. But still, we're talking about people who are on television as opposed to sending you other independent YouTubers. So the algorithm both props up the right and suppresses the left. And the right is also, any issues they may have with the algorithm, they're able to overcome it because they have an unlimited amount of money because of their billionaire backers. They have actual ad campaigns on YouTube. You see countless ads from the right on YouTube. I have never in my life seen a single ad from the Young Turks on YouTube. You know, they have ads on their own show, but in terms of if you watch some other video, you're never going to see a Young Turks ad pop up in the middle of a video because they don't have ads. They can't afford ads. But these right-wing channels with these massive billionaire backers, they're able to have these ad campaigns both on YouTube and on Facebook, and I'm sure on Twitter as well. Anywhere where there are ads, they're going to have those ads out there. So that has helped them to overcome any issue they may have with the algorithm. So again, it comes back to the algorithm. Now, the way to solve this, I don't know. I really don't, because ultimately, it has to be on these tech platforms to decide that they want to change how the algorithm operates. And if they're fine with the way it operates right now, then they're not going to see a reason to change it. You know, they may have some tweaks here and there. Ultimately, those tweaks end up just hurting independent YouTubers as opposed to doing anything about disinformation, because YouTube platforms, this shows you how they do not care about misinformation. They platform a channel like Fox News over mine, or over the Young Turks, or over, you know, Nomiki Konst, or over Mike Figueredo. They will platform Fox News, even though it is full of crap. They platform that over any independent lefty YouTuber because Fox News is a massive corporation. So because Fox News is attached to this is how this algorithm tends to work when it comes to political videos. It is attached to a large website, and those Google searches impact what YouTube suggests in your search for political videos. Because of that, it props up that reactionary garbage coming from places like Fox News over our kind of content. So yeah, long story short, the algorithm is the problem. But look, I ultimately agree here. One last point I wanted to make before I end this video was on this. So I rather Rogan be at the top of this list than Tucker. You know, for me, this is like a glimmer of hope in the sense that Rogan's at least willing, hopefully more so in the future, to have the occasional conversation where he is refuted and he is corrected, whereas Tucker is not. So that, you know, is at least something to look to hopefully have some faith in, is that it's better to have someone like that at the top of this list than somebody who is just clearly a putting out white nationalist garbage on a regular basis. So there's that. But ultimately, the algorithm is a big reason for all of this.